Across the ruins of Europe, church bells rang for the first time in 6 years. People danced, kissed strangers, waved flags that had been hidden since the war began. The world called it liberation. But for a group of young German women standing in the shadows of shattered railway yards, liberation meant something else entirely. Their uniforms were threadbare remnants of the Reich. Their faces still held the faint trace of youth beneath soot and exhaustion. And as the crowds cheered the end of the war, these women were quietly herded into trains bound not for home, but for captivity. May 1945, the Reich had collapsed. What was once called the 1,000-Year Empire had burned itself to ash in just 12. And in the chaos, tens of thousands of women, secretaries, nurses, radio operators, typists, found themselves swept into surrender. They were known as Helferinnen, the auxiliaries of the Wehrmacht, women who served the machine that had devoured their country. Now they stood beside rusted trains in cities that no longer existed. Hamburg, Cologne, Munich. Each woman carried a small suitcase, a rosary, and a question that no one dared ask out loud. What would the victors do to us? For years, propaganda had painted the Allies, especially the Americans, as monsters. Wolves, they said. Captivity would mean humiliation, cruelty, perhaps worse. As the trains rumbled westward through burned-out towns and twisted bridges, fear hung thicker than smoke. Inside one of those boxcars sat a woman named Anna, 22, once a secretary in Munich. In a small diary she'd managed to keep hidden, she wrote, "We are being taken far. None knows where. My mother will think I am dead. Perhaps I will be." But Anna wasn't being taken to a prison in Germany. Her journey would end on the far side of an ocean she had never seen. In the chaos of surrender, ports like Bremen and Cherbourg swarmed with ships under the American flag. The women were marched through crowds of soldiers. No jeering, no blows, only papers, clipboards, tags. It was cold, efficient, bureaucratic. They expected vengeance. What they found instead was silence. When the engines roared to life and Europe began to shrink behind them, dread settled into their bones. The Atlantic stretched endless and grey. America, the land of the enemy, waited on the other side. Life aboard the transport ship was strange. The bunks were steel, stacked 3 high. The air smelled of salt and diesel. And then came something none of them expected. Food. Real food. White bread. Hot coffee. Meat. Thick, red, and steaming. At first, they refused to eat. They thought it was a trick. Poison. But hunger won, and tears streamed down their faces as they tasted the first real bread in years. "They feed us as they feed themselves," whispered one woman, astonished. It wasn't kindness they expected. It was punishment. And yet, it was kindness that came. When the ship finally reached New York Harbor, the women gathered on deck, clutching the railings. The skyline rose like a mirage, untouched, glittering, alive. The Statue of Liberty loomed through the fog, a symbol they'd been told to hate. None of them smiled. For them, it wasn't freedom they saw, but defeat. They were marched through the docks, watched by crowds, some curious, some angry. The air smelled clean. The buildings stood tall. And for the first time, the women understood just how completely their world had crumbled. Buses carried them deep into America, through green fields, quiet towns, and white picket fences that looked like scenes from another planet. Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. Camp Ruston, Louisiana. Dozens of POW camps scattered across the land of their former enemy. At the gates, their names were recorded, their uniforms traded for plain work clothes. And then came the moment that would stay with them for life. The delousing station. Steam, tiles, the hiss of pipes. They braced for humiliation. But instead, they were handed bars of soap. Real soap. Thick, white, smelling faintly of flowers. Hot water cascaded over their bodies. Months of grime washed away. Some laughed, some wept, some simply stood there, stunned. Anna wrote in her diary that night, "We were told we would be beaten, mocked, broken. Instead, we were given soap. How can this be?" For the first time, they felt clean, and for the first time, they feared kindness more than cruelty. because kindness forced them to question everything. In the mess halls, they were served stew, potatoes, and bread. In Germany, their families starved in cellars. Here, in the enemy's camp, they ate like human beings again. They worked, some in laundries, some in fields, others in kitchens, and were paid in small camp currency. Enough to buy chocolate, lipstick, a mirror. One woman whispered, "I feel human again," then burst into tears. At night, letters arrived from home, smuggled, censored, trembling with despair. "We boil weeds for soup," one mother wrote. "If you have anything, send it." The women stared at the letters in silence, surrounded by abundance they could not explain. How could the enemy feed them when their own children starved? Anna wrote again, "I eat and my stomach thanks me. I sleep and my body grows strong. Yet each kindness cuts me deeper. Hatred is easy, dignity is unbearable." It was a new kind of captivity, not of chains, but of conscience. The Americans, too, were bewildered. One guard wrote in a letter home, "They are not what we were told. They are girls, and they look at us as if waiting for a blow that never comes." And so two enemies met, not in battle, but in the quiet strangeness of humanity. A dropped flashlight, a shared song, a look that lingered too long, moments small enough to be forgotten, yet powerful enough to haunt them for life. As the weeks turned to months, the women realized something painful. They had survived the war, but the war inside them had only just begun. For every bar of soap, every meal, every act of mercy, forced them to ask a question they could not answer. If the enemy could be kind, what does that make us? Anna's diary ends in the autumn of 1945. The last words read simply, "A kindness is the hardest thing to bear." Most of the women were eventually sent home. Many returned to find their cities gone, their families scattered. Some never spoke of their time in America. Others kept the memories locked away, the smell of soap, the taste of bread, the shock of gentleness. History remembers the victors and the defeated, but rarely the bewildered. These women were not heroes. They were not villains. They were something far more human,